あらっとみんな何が好き？もちろん大好きアイスクリーム止められないこの恋この愛でメロディー溶けちゃうよ気づいてまいたりとだけ大好きアイスクリームめっちゃ中期ないない足りないないないないない船買えないない手に腹変えられない間に終わったイエンダラポンドユーロマニシュキシュキルピアリラウォンゲンドマニははい寄ってらっしゃいなったら大げな社長様お宝売りますらレッツゴーオークションドクロのハータナンバー2オンボラパーカーナンバー3リップに眼帯は使用済みHow much? からの1からのもう一声 How much? からの2からの3ぶっ飛んでほじのほじのマニマニ助けてほじのキャリキャリ達上ほいマニはパレパレパレパレパレパレ売り出せやお宝ドバドバドババコインでもチュキコインシャインコインなんてねならなら欲望かざされメロメロポンの満たされショキロキラキコインぐるぐる世界が回されてスーパーチャーミングな You are hot so right いざハマかコングラチュレーションイエンダラポンドユーロマニシュキシュキルピアリラウォンゲンドマニははいドラコマベセタンレアルマルクチュチュ高価な米金銀銅マニはお宝売って入金やってお船を買ってハッピーキー出航して嵐にやってサンキューナンパ先で口座見てあなたの方がこりゃくちゃって大発見これをマリンと命名するレッジャー愛用チークナンバー5ブランチのフォークナンバー6よだれスカーフまだ足りないナンバー9抜き出せブーツナンバー7サービスサービスナンバー1わがままボディの巨大How much? からのからの なんて氷の氷の
I've never felt so voyeuristic while doing research before. At one point I realized I was watching this man, watch this man, watch this man, watch this man. Let's get some more in here. At this rate, we're just a couple more dudes watching dudes away from world peace. Say hello to Ross Scott. He's leading the charge on the Stop Killing Games initiative. On the screen you can see his own words spelling out the movement. In plain speak, the petition's to try and get the EU government to take a closer look at publishers that are selling video games or selling stuff in video games and then taking it all away. This is not a draft bill or any attempt at legislation, but rather an attempt to try to get the conversation started amongst politicians. If you're a resident of the EU or the UK, then the links will be in the description. The UK petition has only until the 15th of July, and the EU petition ends at the end of July. It's kind of close, but there's been a massive surge of activity following the last 8 days. 8 days ago, the UK petition was at 15,000, and the EU petition was at 400,000. This new wave of support is most likely because Ross finally decided to take off the gloves and address how big streamer and content creator Pirate Software misrepresented the initiative.
His ego is so out of control, I feel like he's only a week or two away from exclusively referring to himself in third person, like Stone Cold fucking Steve Austin. And that's the truth, cause Pirate Software said so.
Am I a little bit angry at Pirate Software for misrepresenting this initiative and still constantly becoming the lightning rod for just not, presenting it in a good faith manner? Yes, absolutely.
Someone like Pirate Software has gone out and done a horrible video on it, misrepresenting what it is, giving a ton of misinformation and actually kind of killing the initiative from the get-go, and then just being very egotistical about it, not saying sorry and really opening up to it and being like, shit, my bad, and then fixing any of the things that he said were wrong about it. It's a fucking mess.
Pirate Software, once again, is responding to criticism. Multiple creators have been calling him out for how he's misrepresented the movement, Charlie, Mudahar, and more. Yet, instead of engaging in good faith, he's chosen to triple down, inventing demands that were never mentioned in the original Accursed Farms video. He's taken to Twitter to paint himself a victim, calling the criticism dogpiling, while once again fixating on the vague language that was contained within the initiative and pretending like a petition is a formal legislative proposal rather than what it actually is, a grassroots call for consumer protection.
I will mention that in passing from time to time, but I don't want to make this video about Pirate Software. I want to make this video about you and why you should support the initiative, because it comes down, to me at least, to plain and simple consumer rights. And I don't mean the modern mutation of consumerism that leaves your shopping cart fat, your wallet thin, and your brain starving for dopamine. To me, it's about creating an even playing field for both buyers and sellers. Yes, both. If the buyers are too powerful, then no one will sell anything. If the sellers are too powerful, they end up owning the buyers. One should not be allowed to get the upper hand over the other. And for that, you need a referee, the government. And as far as digital ownership is concerned, the referee needs to wake up and get with the times. Let's start with the rights that I think are most definitely being infringed on. The most blatant one is a buyer's right to be informed. Milk has an expiration date. I know when a Netflix subscription ends, my vacuum comes with a 90-day warranty. These are all things I am made aware of before I make a purchase. In contrast, video games are shy and downplay their potential deal breakers. In my opinion, this whole fiasco could be avoided if a game that has the risk of being made unavailable one day stated it loud and clear. But the industry doesn't want better signage because it might cost them sales. As an example, if I buy Black Ops 6 from Sony, the store page says online play required and PS Plus required for online play. Helldivers 2 also says online play required and PS Plus required for online play. These two games are sold in the exact same way, but do not have the same online needs. If I don't have internet or the servers go down, I can still play the campaign, zombies, or multiplayer with bots on Black Ops 6. But Helldivers 2 is completely left at the mercy of my connection to the servers. I'm not saying there shouldn't be Helldivers 2. I'm not saying there shouldn't be games that can only be played online. I'm not demonizing live service games, nor is this even exclusive to live service games. They're just more vulnerable right now. My ideal, bare minimum ask is that there needs to be better signage. Now to get into the rights that are maybe not being infringed upon, but are becoming murky. Stuff that we can't really agree is or isn't a violation of consumer rights, but needs to be re-looked at. And for that, I present to you digital ownership as a whole. This is one spot where conversation spins its wheels because online consumerism has evolved faster than commerce laws can adapt. In the terms of service of any video game, you will undoubtedly find a line somewhere that says you are not buying a video game. You are buying a license to play a video game that can be revoked for any reason whatsoever at any point in time. Again, the biggest thing for me there is it's a transparency issue. I'd like that front and center on the cover and in the game store instead of behind the dumpster in the back alley where no one reads it. I also don't like this idea that terms of services can be amended at any point in time after purchase, and your only choices are either consent or lose access. Keep in mind that this is not universal. Terms of service does not beat law. And some people might show up and say, well, it's because there's so many licenses in video games. There were licenses in video games before. Respectfully, I disagree. I believe that this is the effect, not the cause. General audiences didn't ask for licensing culture. The industry either chose to deal this way or gave up their bargaining power and assumed the money could be made up on the consumer side. Unity tried to pull some licensing shenanigans, and the developers made it quite clear that for as much as they liked the game engine, they were not going to put up with the new terms. So the terms were walked back. That is how you send feedback for change. Too many people, as soon as they hear they're getting a raw deal, walk away from the table or just tank it to the face. So nothing changes because companies only get feedback from people with more money than spine or people who aren't their customer base. Here's the magic words. I like your product, but I don't like your business. This sends a signal that there is money to be made with some negotiations. We don't know what can and can't be negotiated because the last 10 plus years have just been go, go, go. And the industry now is relying on that trajectory withstanding. It's a catch-22. We need Stop Killing Games to sort out old problems, but we can't talk about Stop Killing Games without getting caught up in old problems. But if we're not being stalled out by old problems, we're also being stalled out by new, future, hypothetical problems on the developer side. As I said before, there is a massive cloud of drama surrounding this campaign because of Pirate Software, but he is not the only developer who's against the Stop Killing Games initiative. A quick example here is Chet Felizek, one of the writers for Half-Life, Portal, and Left 4 Dead. And I myself have spoken with multiple developers who were initially against the initiative, and then they changed their minds when we talked it out some more. I'm not defending Pirate Software. I think his opinion is valid, and it makes sense if it's the first opinion you heard on the matter. Respectfully, it has nothing to do with the context of Stop Killing Games. I know people like Legendary Drops think Pirate Software's take on Stop Killing Games is so wrong that he believes Pirate Software is doing it intentionally. Maybe he is, but when multiple people are independently coming to the same conclusions, it makes me consider there's either something wrong with the language of the initiative that makes developers uncomfortable, or maybe the experience of being a game developer makes them see from a different perspective that non-developers cannot. But we'll never know unless we listen, and here's the points I heard. One of the biggest fears by far is that developers might become prisoners to games that they are forced to keep alive. Well, it's not the Keep Games Alive campaign, nor is it the Stop Games from Dying campaign. It's the Stop Killing Games campaign. It's a purposeful and intentional removal that the initiative is against. As the quote goes, specifically, the initiative seeks to prevent the remote disabling of video games by the publishers before providing reasonable means to continue functioning of said video games without the involvement from the side of the publisher. And the definition of reasonable of a person having sound judgment, fair and sensible, as much as is appropriate or fair, moderate. A reasonable attempt to hand the game off to players is all that's being asked for, a try. You warn the players the game could disappear one day, you try your best, that's it. The gaming Gestapo isn't going to break into your house in the middle of the night and force you to keep the game running at gunpoint. Your great-great-grandchildren won't be forced to hold up the crumbling infrastructure of Left 4 Dead 2. And most importantly, this, like many initiatives, will not apply retroactively. You won't be made to pay alimony for abandoning your past works. The second anti-SKG point is the amount of work a developer has to put in ahead of time to put in an end-of-life plan. It could be daunting and restrict what gets made, or maybe they'd have to give up something they couldn't hand over. Usually this train of thought ends up with a lot of assumptions that you have to leave a video game as good as the game was at its peak. Going back to Chet Falazek, he believes if a game had matchmaking to begin with, it should always have matchmaking to preserve a game's spirit, and that would take a lot of work to keep that service up. That's not what it's asking for. And personally, I don't think a game needs to be maintained with all the bells and whistles it operated on while it was alive. Pirate Software made it seem as if Stop Killing Games would force online multiplayer games to be rebalanced and converted to single player, but I think that is assuming too much, if not just flat out ridiculous. SKG anticipates a lesser version of a game would be all that's left accessible, and that's fine. Effectively, games would become museums for themselves, and each genre or game would have to figure out what that means for itself. If it's an MMO, maybe you're only left with the starting area. But who am I to say? I don't play that many MMOs. Let the MMO community weigh in on that. This is a group effort. Talk to Josh Strife Hayes or anyone not me about MMOs. If it's a MOBA, specifically Smite, I'd like to at least be left with the training area and let me access the skins I purchased, because SKG doesn't apply to free-to-play games at all, unless they sold microtransactions. But again, it doesn't apply retroactively, so my purchases would be gone. Is any of this really that different from keeping an antique car or sealed comic books? No one holds on to those for practical reasons. It's sentimental. And the appreciating value, sure, but that's another topic. And the final big point from developers that I will push back on is the idea that regulations impede creative liberties. The government shouldn't dictate what gets put into a video game because they're censoring art, man. This might sound harsh, but to that I say your rights as a creative are different from your rights as a seller. You can make whatever you want just for you, but it's when you wish to enter a market that the rules of said market apply. Should predatory loot boxes be allowed simply because a developer deems it crucial to their artistic vision? Banksy, is that you? If you're turning your art into a commercial product, then there are commercial rules. This is nothing new nor exclusive to video games. And finally, after all this, there is still the big floating question for the undecided or the apathetic. Why should I care about any of this? I'm not asking you to care. I'm just asking you to sign. Ross cares. You don't have to. And you don't want to get to the position where you personally have to care, because that means you lost a game. It impacted you. If you're asking for stronger examples than games like The Crew, then what you're asking for is what I would call the perfect victim. That's when the right person gets hurt in just the right way, and then that moves legislation along. You're asking for a martyr, essentially. Are you volunteering? Is that what I'm hearing? But why would you wait until your house is on fire to buy fire insurance? I am presenting you a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to care a little now, so you don't have to care a lot later. I speak apathy. I'm a millennial. I know what it's like to feel like everything feels like a chore. My check engine light's been on for as long as I've had my car. You have to brush your teeth every day because otherwise they just cause you grief. You have to plan meals, buy groceries, and cook like 3 times a day, and for what? Just to defecate? Again? And now you're being asked to fill out forms. And the very least we could do is make it sound exciting or relevant. It's not exciting. It is relevant. This initiative, from a preventative standpoint, is as good as it's gonna get with minimal casualties. If it doesn't pass, then the next time we have this conversation will be because it became more relevant, more exciting, and more bad things happen to you. We saw this exact same process happen with the refund systems and early access programs, so I have full faith that this is going to happen either now when you're not bothered, or later when you are bothered. Think of it this way, from one unbothered to another. I would rather be a signature on a petition than be a plaintiff or a victim.
Evaluating Magic cards can be a tricky thing. Even the most experienced players can't always look at a card and figure out whether or not it's going to be good. This is because Magic is an incredibly complex game, and without playing with cards, it can be difficult to figure out how powerful the effects they have actually are. One of the most notable examples of this is Necropotence. When it was first revealed in 1995, many players thought it was a terrible card. After all, it keeps you from being able to draw cards normally, and why would you ever want to pay life to draw cards, especially when you have to wait until your next end step to get those cards? However, Necropotence, of course, turned out to be one of the best card draw engines ever printed, to the point that they even had to ban it in multiple formats, and today, it's considered one of the most powerful cards ever. So, while evaluating how good a card is going to be is tough, I also think it can be pretty difficult to look at older Magic cards and figure out how good they used to be. This is because if you don't know the metagame and the power level of the cards in their original context, you aren't really going to understand the card. I've done a couple of videos now taking a look at 10 cards that used to be really good, even though they aren't very impressive to today's Magic players, and there are tons of other cards in this category. So in this MTG Top 10, I'm going to look at 10 more cards that look terrible to today's players, but were once so good that they were quite successful in competitive Magic. While most of my top 10s use rankings, that's not the case here because this list is super subjective. These are just 10 cards that look bad today but used to be great in no particular order. This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. Use the links in the description to visit their store. Let's start with Erratic Explosion. For 2 generic and a red, it's a sorcery that lets you choose any target, and then you reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-land, and Erratic Explosion does damage equal to that card's mana value to the chosen target. This card seems way too, well, erratic, to be something that would work well in competitive Magic, doesn't it? I mean, you have to stack your deck just the right way or it's going to be woefully inefficient. That's a ton of setup for a card that does nothing but damage. However, Erratic Explosion actually saw some considerable play in Extended starting in 2002, where it was partially the namesake for a deck called Draco Explosion. Draco could be on this list just as much as Erratic Explosion could, since it's a super expensive creature that demands lots of setup and doesn't pay you off in a very significant way, but when it's on the top of your library when you cast Erratic Explosion, you do 16 damage to your opponent. These decks use Scroll Rack to stack their deck and pull this off, and they had no real other way to win the game. Draco was virtually uncastable in the deck too, so this doesn't seem like a combo that is worthwhile, especially when the deck's 2 main cards are pretty awful without one another, and, to top it all off, 16 damage isn't even enough to one-shot the opponent. Well, that would normally be true, but the metagame in Extended in 2002 was filled with decks that like to damage themselves. Decks were packing a whole lot of lands that damage their controller, like the Painland Cycle, City of Brass, Fetch Lands, and Barbarian Ring, the list goes on. So 16 damage was often enough to end the game. And in an emergency, the deck could cast Cunning Wish to grab a Fault Line out of the sideboard to do the last few damage. But yeah, this deck mostly sounds like absolute jank today, but in a metagame where opponents were often lowering their life total to 16 all on their own, this was a 2-card combo that could win the game pretty quickly. This deck would actually seem even jankier if it weren't for the fact that calibrated blast decks are a thing in Modern right now, and there's kind of a similar situation, where mini decks hurt themselves a lot with shock lands and fetch lands. But it's worth noting that Erratic Explosion is way worse since it's a sorcery that doesn't have flashback, and calibrated blast decks are really just 5-color domain decks that can actually cast a whole bunch of creatures, not a deck built entirely around winning with the blast. Now let's look at another seemingly awful spell, Enduring Ideal. For 5 generic and 2 white, it's a sorcery that lets you tutor up an enchantment and put it directly on the battlefield, and it also has Epic, which means that for the rest of the game, you can't cast spells. In exchange for that massive downside, you get to copy Enduring Ideal during your upkeep every turn. I often see Epic come up when people want to talk about the worst mechanics in the history of Magic, but Enduring Ideal's significant success on the competitive scene precludes the mechanic from ever belonging on any such list. Now, it is true that the other 4 epic spells are horrendous, but Enduring Ideal was actually really good in both Standard and Extended, spawning an entire deck built around it, and I think these are among some of the sweetest decks of all time. So what made it worth it to cut yourself off from ever casting a spell again? Well, the idea was to use Enduring Ideal to construct a prison your opponent couldn't escape from. Form of the Dragon, a card which could probably be on the list in its own right, was key here, as it made it so only flyers could attack you, while also letting you do 5 to any target during your upkeep. This could quickly kill your opponent or clear away problem creatures while protecting you. Although the very fact it lowers your life total to 5 was a bit of a problem, it became a lot less of one when you could grab Ivory Mask to stop direct damage, or Confiscate to take away opposing flyers. Basically, this deck had answers for almost anything, and it was actually well worth giving up the ability to cast a spell in exchange for getting the best enchantment out of your deck every single turn. An Enduring Ideal deck even top-8'd the World Championship in 2005, in addition to achieving many other top 8s in Standard and Extended between 2005 and 2008. Enduring Ideal is actually a really cool card, and its power makes it a lot sadder that the other cards in the Epic cycle are so uninteresting and so terrible. Now that we've looked at a couple of sorceries, let's take a look at a massive creature, Krosan Cloud Scraper. For 7 generic and 3 green mana, it's a 13/13, and at the beginning of your upkeep you have to pay 2 green or sacrifice it. While this creature is definitely huge, it's largely a vanilla creature, making it hard for it to take advantage of its body, and that's despite the fact that it does also have Morph, meaning you can cast it face down for 3 generic mana, in which case it's a 2/2. You can turn the Cloud Scraper face up at any time for its Morph cost, but it's not like you get much of a discount when you do, since it's 7 generic and 2 green. So yeah, maybe the dream is that you can sneak this past your opponent and then pay 9 to turn it face up and slam in for 13, but you're spending a whole lot of mana to pull that off, and there's no guarantee that it ever works out. However, there was one deck that found a way to make use of this big dumb creature, but kind of like with Draco and Erratic Explosion, it wasn't because people were trying to cast it, and instead the decks that used it simply tried to take advantage of the massive numbers on the card. Back in 2005, there was an extended graveyard combo deck that used Cephalid Illusionist plus a way to target it for free, like Shuko, to mill the entire library. This worked because the Illusionist mills 3 cards anytime it gets targeted, and Shuko's equip cost of 0 allows you to do it as many times as you want. This deck's win condition was then casting Reanimate or Exhume to bring back a Sutured Ghoul. The Ghoul exiles any number of creatures from your graveyard when it enters, and its power and toughness are equal to the total power and toughness of the cards you exile. In other words, the Cloud Scrapers would turn into stats for the Ghoul, which was now a huge creature with Trample, and it also had haste thanks to Dragon Breath or Anger being in the graveyard. So yeah, even back then, Krosan Cloud Scraper was a bad card if you were planning on putting it into play, but once you were putting those huge stats on an even bigger creature with haste and Trample that could really easily end the game in a single swing, Krosan Cloud Scraper can actually do something really useful. Let's look at another morph creature now, Brine Elemental, which was printed a few years after the Cloud Scraper. For 4 generic and 2 blue mana, it's a 5/4 with morph, and its morph cost is 5 generic and 2 blue, and when it turns face up, each opponent skips their next untap step. There's a lot going on here that really doesn't make this seem like a good card. I mean, playing it face up as a 6 mana 5/4 is awful, and playing it face down for 3 generic and then spending 7 more mana later in the game to keep your opponent from untapping doesn't exactly sound great. I mean, sure, sometimes that effect can be good, but you spent 10 total mana to get to the point where the elemental could do its thing, so it's kind of like you skipped your untap step too. That definitely doesn't seem like it could ever be worth it. Certainly not in 60 card formats. But there was one particular deck in Block and Standard that could do some incredibly nasty things with Brine Elemental, a deck that even used the humorous name Pickles in reference to the fact that some pickles are made using brine. So how could this creature ever be the centerpiece of any deck? Well, the trick here was creating a lock where your opponent would never untap. This could be achieved by combining the elemental with Vesuvan Shapeshifter. This is a creature that has Morph itself, and when it turns face up, it can become a copy of any creature on the battlefield. Importantly, this means that when it copies another Morph creature, it gets that creature's "when this creature is turned face up" trigger, and in this case, the Shapeshifter's Morph cost is only 1 generic and a blue, so you get the Elemental's powerful effect for a massive discount. But things don't end there. You also can choose to turn the Shapeshifter face down during your upkeep every single turn. So as long as you have a Brine Elemental around, you can make it so your opponent never untaps again. And while a combo using a couple of fragile creatures might normally be a little too fragile, it doesn't really matter when you've choked off all of your opponent's resources. Eventually you overtake them with your creatures when they're completely defenseless. Pickles decks found significant success in both Block and Standard between 2006 and 2007, and this seemingly inefficient creature was crucial to those decks' success. Let's look now at Force of Nature, which like Krosan Cloud Scraper is a massive green creature that appears to have too big of a downside by today's standards. For 2 generic and 4 green, it's an 8/8 with Trample. That's not too bad, even by today's standards, but it's not amazing either. But the rest of the Force's text box is all downside, because you have to pay a whopping 4 green mana during your upkeep. Otherwise, it turns around and punches you in the face for 8 damage. Notably, it doesn't get sacrificed or tapped when you fail to pay the cost, as with some cards, and that comes with both upsides and downsides. Keeping your creatures nice, but potentially getting punched in the face again on your next turn definitely isn't. However, Force of Nature was a heck of a lot better in the early days of competitive Magic. In fact, it was so good that it achieved a top 8 at the game's second ever World Championship. This is partly because of the simple fact that creatures at the time were much, much worse than they are today, so getting a 6-mana 8/8 Trampler, even with a downside that will make it hard for you to ever cast other spells, was a great deal. And it's important to put the Force in its original context to realize just how huge it was for the time. It was quite literally the biggest creature in the game for the first full year of Magic, and while bigger creatures or creatures of the same size were eventually printed in 1994 and 1995, they were creatures like Colossus of Sardia, Leviathan, Polar Kraken, and Marjan. Yeah, those cards are absolute garbage and always have been, as they come with massive downsides that make what Force of Nature requires you to do look like no big deal, especially because it costs way less mana than every single one of them. So yeah, if you wanted a big threatening creature for the first few years of Magic, you couldn't really do any better than Force of Nature, a creature that could absolutely wreck all the other creatures that were on the board when it came down, and it could also come down ahead of schedule, thanks to mana dorks like Llanowar Elves and Birds of Paradise, and once it hit the board, your opponent had to kill it or die in very few turns, even if you were paying extra mana to keep it around. Let's continue with a look at creatures with huge downsides. This time, let's look at Troublesome Spirit. For 2 generic and 2 blue mana, it's a 3/4 with flying, and at the end of your turn, you tap all lands you control. While this is yet another case of a card performing better than you'd think simply because it was more efficient in its original context, even once you correct for that, the Spirit looks like something of a head-scratcher. Blue is not exactly a color that's interested in tapping out. Even blue tempo decks like to have up interaction to protect their creatures. But Troublesome Spirit makes that impossible. If anything, Troublesome Spirit almost seems like some anti-blue tech where you donate this to your opponent because you're sick of them having mana to interact on your turn. However, Troublesome Spirit was actually one of the best creatures in mono-blue tempo decks in Standard in 2000 and 2001. How could that ever be possible when it's a card that taps all of your lands? Well, mostly because that Standard format was really, really messed up. It featured multiple spells that you could cast without needing any mana at all, and blue decks were already leaning on this type of card. So in many ways, the Spirit doesn't actually have a meaningful downside. After all, decks were using Daze, Foil, Thwart, and Misdirection. That's right, that's 3 free counterspells. And Misdirection, which is pretty close to a counterspell. So yeah, today Troublesome Spirit would have a hard time finding traction in blue decks, between the fact its stat line is no longer impressive, and the fact that blue decks can't really afford to tap all of their lands every single turn, and that's thankfully because Wizards of the Coast learned their lesson when it comes to printing free counterspells. Speaking of Troublesome Spirits, I hope it's not too troublesome for me to ask you to subscribe. I'm closing in on 100,000 subscribers and would love to meet that milestone by the end of the year. Only about half of my viewers are actually subscribed, so I would really appreciate your help in reaching this huge channel milestone. Now let's move from one spirit to another, this time Spirit of the Night. For 6 generic and 3 black mana, it's a 6/5 with flying, trample, haste, protection from black, and it has first strike as long as it's attacking. So the good news is that Spirit of the Night has no real downside, unless you look at its absolutely massive mana cost, of course. This thing isn't even worth close to 9 mana, and that was actually true back in 1998 too. However, kind of like with Force of Nature, Spirit of the Night was the scariest creature in the game in its original context. This was so much the case that the Spirit's very existence helped spawn Magic's very first competitive Reanimator decks. After all, if you can get this into play ahead of schedule, it represents a really scary clock thanks to haste, and there was literally nothing capable of blocking it and taking it down in the game at the time. Basically, Spirit of the Night was the Atraxa of 1998. Back then, having a creature that was hard to interact with and represented a huge clock was plenty to win the game with. As a result, recurring survival decks dominated the 1998 World Championship, and Spirit of the Night was a big part of that. These decks combined 2 insane enchantments from Exodus: Survival of the Fittest and Recurring Nightmare. Survival allowed these decks to turn any creature in their hand into a tutor, and Recurring Nightmare gave you a repeatable way to reanimate stuff. Survival could both enable your reanimation by letting you discard stuff, and find your reanimation targets by tutoring them up. This deck was more than capable of reanimating Spirit of the Night on turn 3, and the game was virtually over when that happened. In addition to the game's other creatures being so bad against it, There also wasn't much removal in Standard that could take it down. If you look at the top 8 decks at the 1998 World Championship, you won't find a single card in the 75 of any deck that could actually do the job. The most played removal at the event was Fire Blast and Necrotal, and as great as those cards are, they do stone nothing against the Spirit. Today, Spirit of the Night isn't even that good when you cheat it into play, so it can be hard to imagine that it was ever a premium reanimation target, but it certainly was in 1998. And Recurring Nightmare and Survival of the Fittest made it very easy to kill your opponent with the Spirit of the Night in a hurry. Next, let's look at Soldevi Digger. For 2 generic mana, it's an artifact with an activated ability that costs 2 generic, and it lets you put the top card of your graveyard on the bottom of your library. Yeah, that's a very small effect, and one that doesn't even impact the board. I mean, sure, it can be fun in some commander decks like River Song or Grenzo, who let you do stuff with the bottom card of your library, but it's probably pretty hard to believe that this card was once good in 60-card competitive formats, but it was. Control and Prison decks in 1996 and 1997 could turn this into a legitimate win condition. For example, it appeared in the top 8 of the 1996 World Championship, where it was featured in a Stasis deck. This Prison enchantment makes players skip their untap steps, and these decks didn't run any way to lower the opponent's life at all, so they leaned entirely on the opponent eventually running out of cards. While Stasis is symmetrical, these decks had plenty of ways to get around that, most notably by bouncing Stasis and getting to have a turn with an untap step whenever they wanted to, and just activating the Digger a few times was often enough to keep you from milling out before your opponent did. So, yeah, it seems super silly, and today there are lots of better ways to keep yourself from milling out, but in Standard in 1996 and 1997, Soldevi Digger was an actual win condition, which tells you a lot about how powerful Control and Prison decks in that format could be. They could grind the game to a screeching halt and just win the game with Soldevi Digger. And that's pretty absurd. Let's look at another artifact now, Eolapile. And yes, that is how you pronounce it. It's actually a real word for a steam engine-like invention from the 2nd century BCE, although it isn't a weapon or explosive as seems to be depicted in this magic card. Anyway, it's 2 generic mana for an artifact, and you can pay 1 generic, tap it, and sacrifice it to do 2 damage to any target. Have you ever wanted to spend 3 times the mana on shock? Well, this thing has you covered. While the effect it has can be useful, it's a woefully inefficient way to do 2 damage, and yet it achieves several top 8s in the Standard of 1996 and 1997. Part of the reason for this is a weird deck building rule for Standard, which required you to include at least 5 cards from each set that was legal in the format at the time, and Fallen Empires, where Eolapile is from, was not exactly a set filled with powerful cards for every type of deck. And that's definitely what led to some of its success, especially at the Pro Tour level, but it continued to see play even after that rule was no longer in place, especially in white and black decks, and there's a big reason for that. White and black both had to put up with creatures that had protection from their removal. There were 2 separate mirrored pairs that saw a ton of play at the time, Order of Lightbur and Order of Ebon Hand, as well as Order of the White Shield and Knight of Stromgald. Yeah, all of these were in Standard at the same time, which is pretty ridiculous. So if you were a monocolored black or white deck, and there were lots of those at the time, you were going to have a serious problem with those creatures, but not if you packed some Eolapiles into your deck, as it gave you a way to deal with those annoying creatures. Notably, Eolapile saw play in the main deck, because it was also passable against the rest of the field, while also giving you a great silver bullet against the right opponent. Let's wrap things up with one last artifact, Serrated Arrows. For 4 generic mana, it's an artifact that enters with 3 arrowhead counters on it, and at the beginning of your upkeep, if there are no arrowhead counters on it, you sacrifice it. You can tap it to remove an arrowhead counter and put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. Getting 3 -1/-1 counters for 4 mana already isn't that impressive, and 4 mana for a card that gives you those counters really, really slowly is even worse. So how in the world is this the most successful card in this video, and by a wide margin? Well, I wanted to talk about Serrated Arrows in particular because I think there are some misconceptions about it. I've regularly heard a narrative about this card that really doesn't stand up to scrutiny. This narrative states that Serrated Arrows only ever saw play in competitive Magic as a result of the deck building rules in Standard during the first half of 1996, but this simply isn't true, as you can see from its very impressive resume. I mean, sure, it would probably have fewer top 8s if it weren't for those deck building rules, but the vast majority of its success came in formats where it wasn't required that you play any cards from Homelands, and people were playing it anyway. So, what's the deal? How is it possible that this clunky artifact was one of the most successful Magic cards of the mid to late 1990s? Well, it's for the same reasons that Eolipile saw play, namely that it gave decks a way to kill really obnoxious creatures that were normally really good tech against them, like those various knights that have protection, which serrated arrows could kill in a single activation. Those weren't the only X1s prevalent in Magic's formats at the time either. In an era where creatures were often less efficient, there were plenty of creatures who would die to a single -1/-1 counter, like Jackal Pups, Savannah Lions, various Mana Elves and Birds of Paradise, Elvish Archers, the list goes on. The point is, against many opponents, Serrated Arrows was capable of killing a creature every single turn, and if you imagine Serrated Arrows doing that for 3 turns, it suddenly seems like it's worth 4 mana, right? Serrated Arrows saw heavy play in Standard in both 1996 and 1997, then transitioned to Extended where it had new targets like Soltari Priest and Sukata Firewalker. Later, it was printed on the Time Spiral bonus sheet, and even as late as 2008, Serrated Arrows was a good card in both Block and Standard, as there was still plenty of value to be had with this 4 mana artifact. So no, Serrated Arrows didn't only see play because of a weird deck building rule, it was actually a very powerful card. One of the most significant cards in Magic for a time, because it gave decks of any color access to removal, even against creatures that would normally be a problem. Those arrowhead counters have killed countless creatures over this card's long history. So those are 10 cards that don't look very good to today's players, but were once really good. If you want to own any of these
weird red cards you've never seen before. If you love mini games in your Commander game, try Game of Chaos. For 3 red mana, you and an opponent get to flip a coin, and then you gamble your life total and you keep doubling the stakes. How fun. If you hate board wipes that work every time, try Puppet's Verdict. For 3 mana, you flip a coin. If you win the flip, destroy all small creatures. If you lose, you destroy all big creatures. All the creatures are getting destroyed, maybe. If you want to lightning bolt everything all at once, try Radiate. For 5 mana, it lets you copy that spell and choose every target you can target with it. That's going to be exciting and a board wipe. Move or show and tell, I've got a card that doesn't always work. Stronghold Gambit. For 2 mana, each player reveals a creature card and the weakest creature comes into play. I might sneak it in the Land of War Elves. If your opponent has a big board and you have no board, try Twist Allegiance. For 7 mana, you and that opponent switch boards, and if they have a lot and you have none, you can win the game right there. That's why you should play these weird red cards you've never
ごめん、クールダウン無理っぽい。絶交しよう。絶交。
Who let her out the house? Anime is a medium that can invoke so many powerful emotions. Sometimes you're so excited the hairs are standing on the back of your neck. Sometimes you're so immersed you're shedding tears along with the characters. And sometimes you want to grab the nearest blunt object and chuck it through your television. I have what my friends refer to as a problem. In the amazing world of romance shows, I cannot help but want to psychologically torture myself with some of the trashiest romance anime known to man. But what if I told you it's because without watching the bad, you can never truly appreciate the good? That's a big fat lie. I'm just addicted to this shit. And this spring, there's been one show standing on top of the biggest, stinkiest pile of trash heap in a season where one of the options is a harem romance show between one guy and his 5 stepsisters. One anime has somehow eclipsed all that to become my certified hate watch of the month. Can a boy-girl friendship survive? A show that has made me so frustrated, showcasing characters so toxic, I can only deal with my anger the only way I know how, making everyone around me suffer too. So, if you woke up today and thought, you know what? My mental health is doing a bit too good today. Oh boy, do I have the cure for that. Man, I'm not gonna lie though, I'm barely a minute into this video and I'm already sick of talking about this show. Can we just get just one anime where male-female relationships aren't some ticking emotional time bomb? Oh? What's this? Yeah, that's more like it. Huge thanks to today's sponsor, Silver and Blood Requiem, for pulling me out of emotional drama quicksand and dropping me into want him to give up on his hobby so he can become a doctor. Typical backboneless romance, the importance of humility, never underestimating others, and that's a positive mindset. Trying your team comp strats. Don't cut me. Tale I'm sure many of us are familiar with. It's told throughout many countries, transcending language, borders, and cultures, teaching new generations the importance of humility, never underestimating others, and that a positive mindset triumphs over acting quickly and carelessly. Now imagine a story where the hair fucking wins. Yu is just your typical backboneless romance protagonist with a single passion in life, crafting homemade flower jewelry, but unfortunately he's afflicted with a condition known as Asian parents, who want him to give up on his hobby so he can become a doctor or some shit. So he needs to show them the only thing that can convince an Asian mum to leave you alone. No mum, I can make money doing this. It's a financially viable career. Don't make me go back to the BBC. However, he ain't attracting any buyers. He's got no aura, no prospect, and no bitches. That is until he has the fortune and we have the misfortune of being noticed by the #1 most beautiful girl in school, who is also the most popular. Himari, who looks at his jewelry and is like,
You smell that? What is that? A cologne? No, money.
She sells out all of his product and realizes this is the greatest opportunity since dropshippers discovered TikTok. They start a partnership together. He's the manufacturer, she's the marketing, hoping to one day open up a jewelry store. Cut to years later where they have grown up to become friends, but not just any type of friends. The best of friends.
ご褒美に背中流してあげよっか。
The best of
ねえユウ、
friends.
実はさ、今私すっごい際どい水着着てるんだよな。
Oh.
じゃあ私も脱いでくるね。
Oh no.
ユウ、目つむってて。
Here's the show in a nutshell. We look so much like a couple here. A couple of besties. Wow. Look familiar? Well, this is it. Except sometimes the dude is Himari and the girl is you, and sometimes they're both the girl and sometimes they're both the dude, and sometimes they're one bounce away from a Mormon soaking session and still like, yeah, just a couple of besties. Ah, hey, I don't see what's so wrong with this. Just another wacky anime rom-com with two friends slowly realizing they have feelings for each other. Sounds like innocent fun to me. Yeah. That's what I thought I was getting into as well. See, what I didn't realize was that I was about to get introduced to some characters that would make me reconsider monkhood to deal with some of the anger it gave me. So, let's talk about some of the... Initially, Himari just seems like your extrovert.
Update complete. For fuck's sake!
A Beavis and Butthead event? Chat, what the fuck is even this shit? Bobtron. Motherfucking Beavis and Butthead. Poggers.
One fugitive remains. Terminate with extreme prejudice. All units, mission objectives in sight. Stay on course. The enemy's on their back foot. Don't let up. The enemy is reeling. Move in and crush them. There's only one traitor left. Eliminate them. No time for motion. We have more work to do. Gunfight. One fugitive remains. Terminate with extreme prejudice. You're the last one standing. Finish the job. The round's nearly done. Stay on mission. Take it on the chin. Get ready for the next round. Time to get it. I hope you have a plan. There's only one traitor left. Eliminate them. Exemplary.
Bow!
Do it again and let's go home. Gunfight. Pacify the AO, kill team. One fugitive remains. Terminate with extreme prejudice. The enemy is floundering. Deliver the coup de grace. Now, hit them again before they mount a counter-offensive. There's only one traitor left. Eliminate them. The enemy is reeling. Move in and crush them. Not your best work. Clean it up. Gunfight. The round's nearly done. Stay on mission. You're a kill team of one. Put your head down and close this out. Failure's not in Crimson's lexicon. Do better. One fugitive remains. Terminate with extreme prejudice. You're running out of pavement, Crimson. It's now or never. chance. Proceed to extract.
Get bet, nerd! Woo! Do 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 do.
Hide and survive. Now you're the last one left. Stay still. Stay hidden. No time for motion. We have more work to do. head down and secure the target.
Oh.
Exemplary, Crimson. Do it again and let's go home. Prop hunt. Shoot to kill. We're not here to negotiate. MTC's being guarded.
Sentinel A.
For this, isn't there, son? Hang on. Of course. Okay. Would you like to tell me what happened to your gear, Private? Well, the pack I figured an adventure guild guy. The poncho, does it look like rain? My drill sergeant helps me learn. Keep the fancy sunny bright. I just a human stain. Well, Trooper, you promised to boots before everyone else. I just did exactly what you told me to. I did the same thing to make my bed and secure my football. Miraculous turnaround I've ever seen. How the worst soldier in the unit has managed to put them all to shame. Just do exactly what I'm told and nothing else, and everything gets easy. You must be proud of yourself, son. I'm waiting for you to tell me. God, a soldier like you comes along once in 1,000 years. All right, Troop, you're next. In the chair. Just think about this. It's like a...
You have been infected. Hunt the survivors.
Would you like to tell me what happened to your gear, Private? Well, the pack I figured an adventure guild. Well, Drew, you promised to boots before everyone else. I just did exactly what you told me to. I did the same thing to make my bed and secure my football. Miraculous turnaround. How the worst soldier in the unit has managed to put them all to shame. If I just do exactly what I'm told and nothing else, and everything gets easy. I'm waiting for you to tell me. Soldier like you comes along once in 1,000 years. All right, Drew, you're next. Get in the chair. Just think about it. And we all know what maggots eat, and I'll be the guy providing. It's a great story. Would you like to tell me what happened to your gear, Brian? Well, the pack I figured it was the poncho.
Survivors remain. Infect them. Not many survivors remain. Hunt them down. Few survivors remain. Infect them. Not many survivors remain. Hunt them down. Few survivors remain. Infect. Not many survivors remain. Hunt them down. Few survivors remain. Infect them. You made it to Huntington.
Victory! God damn, I love the taste of victory!
survivors. Not many survivors remain. Hunt them down. Few survivors remain. Accept them. Not many survivors remain. Hunt them down. Stand down, Crimson.
What's hitting me?
You have joined the ranks of the infected. Kill the survivors. Not many survivors remain. Hunt them out. Few survivors remain. Infect them. Not many survivors remain. Hunt them down. Few survivors remain. Infect them. Not many survivors remain. Hunt them down. Survivors remain. Infect them. Not many survivors remain. Hunt them down. All units prepare for exfil. This one's off.
Yo, hi, Bugs.
survivors remain. Infect them. Not many survivors remain. Hunt them down. Few survivors remain. Infect them. Tactical nuke incoming.
He did it! That asshole motherfucking did it!
Energetic, cute anime heroine with blue hair. And I was getting ready to cheer for her, not knowing I was getting fooled by this hellspawn of a hussy. Now, historically, girls with her hairstyle have not had the greatest track record in romance anime, and I would like to think one of them finally deserves a dub. Yet, she has single-handedly set back the reputation of short, blue-haired romance heroines fucking decades. Rem, Rui, Ichigo. Now, every time I start feeling sorry for one of these girls being on the losing side of love, I'm gonna think back to this face and go, nope, you know what? Maybe the short blue-haired girls deserved it. Blue. From the onset, you can tell that this friendship is doomed. Now, I'm not here to judge. I'm just saying, if any one of my female friends acts like this to me in front of my wife, you can bet my ass is gonna be waking up on her couch that night. In a Saw movie, she platonically hugs him tightly, platonically sits on his lap, platonically holds hands with him, platonically asks him for a kiss, only to constantly tell him, hey man, we're just friends, alright? She could platonically spread those cheeks and ask for the most legendary backshot in history, only to go, what the fuck, no hetero, bro. This is the type of girl who's like, oh my god, ew, he's just like a brother to me, forgetting what sibling relationships are actually like in the world of anime. But hey, we all know that romance anime characters have the emotional intelligence of a rock. Maybe she's just in denial of her feelings. And make no mistake, she definitely is. She's in more denial than an Arsenal fan telling you next year is the year they're finally going to be lifting a trophy, which we absolutely will. But things take a turn when Enomoto gets introduced, another girl who's also interested in used jewelry. But Himari is so up her own arse, she doesn't even register this as a threat. She's so bloody confident that she teases you about Enomoto and actually goes out of her way to set them up, even telling you he should make the girl his new model for his accessories. You know, the thing she's been solely doing for you this entire time? Bitch is feeling so smug, she calls the girl out for being being a virgin right in front of you. Like, damn, girl, we going full Britney Spears toxic with this bitch?
そんなリアクション露骨だと童貞だってバレちゃうの。
But this smugness is short-lived when she sees you actually giving Enomoto some time. And not only that, but Enomoto is actually in touch with her feelings and tells her that she likes you. And they were unknowingly each other's childhood crushes before she even came into the picture, outranking her prestigious childhood friend status.
付き合ってないの？あれ？もしかしてタイプ？
Wait, there's actually a chance they like each other? Well, guess there's only one reasonable response.
Oh my god.
This girl gets jealous that you is paying attention to someone else after she just confidently tried to get them together. This hare didn't just take a nap. This hare had a 5-mile head start, ran back to give the tour to some motorbike, and is getting salty that somehow catching up. But she ain't having any of it. It's time for this pussy to mark her territory without urinating though.
Even if at this point I think you would actually be down for that.
じゃあエノッチがいなかったらこの前みたいにお試しキス。
Ah yes, asserting dominance right in front of the girl you try to set him up with. Definitely not toxic or manipulative at all. But look, this situation can easily be resolved because she's still way ahead of her competition. All she needs to do is...
する？
Oh, shit. Is she actually going in?
私は他の人にはそんなこと冗談でも言わないのにな。
Finally! At least she's actually being sincere.
おいひまり、その左手見せてみろ。ひまり、お前マジで動画撮ろうとしてんじゃねえぞ。
A few moments later.
いいって言ってんだからさっさとやれよバーカ。
But you just... He was gonna until... I'm sorry, is this the hussy convention? Were her pronouns changed to this bitch? If the Olympics gave up medals for mental gymnastics, this girl would get the gold and set a new world record in the process. But wait, it gets worse. Because we all know why she wanted evidence of you going in for the smooch. It's to slap her big fat ego over poor Enomoto, which she does anyway when she tells her what her crush had attempted.
冗談だよ。
We're all out here busy advocating for women's rights while she's out there preaching the words of women's wrongs. Oh wait, hold on. She's adding more to her routine? Because when she actually gets called out for her toxic ass behavior and you takes the suggestion that she made to make Enomoto his new model, Himari just...
言うなんて本当に絶好だ。
This is episode 3. Episode 3! Surely it goes up from here. You know, it probably wouldn't be so frustrating if we didn't have a main character who enables every bit of toxicity that Himari exhibits. Now, we've met some dense romance protagonists in our time, but this is a different kind. There's a girl waving a red flag the size of Russia 5 feet in front of him, but this motherfucker is completely colorblind. Unlike Himari, Yu is in absolutely no denial of his feelings. While Himari is out there platonically asking for fake-out kisses, Yu would willingly platonically hit that so hard, whoever could pull him out would become the king of bloody England. He knows he likes Himari, but unfortunately, if love makes you blind, you can see about as well as Gojo Satoru. Because, I mean, just look at this. Putting up with Himari's bullshit, listening to exactly what she tells you to do, then getting water thrown in your face and being told that your friendship has now ended. This is a crash out so insane, Moist Critical is about to make a video on it. But okay, maybe your friend was having a day off. You know you did nothing wrong, but maybe you just have to talk to her directly and confront her. And how does she respond? Which you think is the wake-up call for him to realize, hey, maybe this one's for the streets. But if that wasn't enough, Himari concocts a plan to pretend she's suddenly going to move to a different city, accidentally sending him an email saying that she's been picked up by an agency in Tokyo in a ruse to fuel her ego and get him to come crawling back to her. So here I am, waiting for Himari to have the smug slapped out of her, feeling the consequences of the most blatant attempt of emotional manipulation which they can absolutely set up for a slam dunk.
私の予想だとユウはこの連休の間に泣きついてくるね。
Actual consequences? Yu makes a letter of resignation to his school, showing that he's willing to give up his life to move to Tokyo with her, making her a custom ring, groveling at her feet, giving Himari everything she wants and more, and the worst part? She doesn't even tell him that it was a fucking lie the entire time! But who needs consequences? This is our main girl. She's not just any romance heroine, she is her. That's right. Give me a H, give me an I, give me an M, give me an A, give me an R, give me an I.
That's not what this is saying.
It takes up until episode 8 for Himari to fully come clean and apologize for her lying and manipulating him. And then his response upon hearing this is, it's okay. It's okay! My doormat has less people walking over it than this guy over here, and this was the exact moment I realized I will never see the ramifications I was looking for. Bro is just too far gone. This man would buy the entire stock of Himari's bath water if she wasn't too busy drinking it all herself, because maybe he just doesn't have a chance with any other girl who's not as toxic or manipulative, or all in all is just a self-centered psychopath. Wait a minute.
Hello, Moto.
Equally as far gone as our resident doormat is Enomoto, who is in love with you. She makes notes of all his likes, dislikes, personality traits he wants in a partner, and honestly, it would be admirable if it wasn't so sad to watch. You know how some people say guys just can't take the hints? Well, here's the hint. Girl, it is not happening. Why are you staying here? This girl gets rejected so many times, I'm starting to wonder if she saw Rem's scene in ReZero and marked it down as a fetish. Watching her is like watching the human centipede with Enomoto all the way at the back. And yet she keeps trying. Look at this. Look at this girl. Anyway, girl, keep shooting your shot. And that sums up the viewing experience of this anime. It's been a long time since I've watched a show that fills me with enough concentrated anger to power the entire country of Norway. Then, why don't you just stop watching it? Look, I'm not even going to pretend this pain is anything but self-inflicted. Anyone who knows me, I am just a moth, flying towards one flaming dumpster fire of a romance to another. Cause, you know what? I can't even call these characters unrealistic. I've met friends who act like these two. I've come across girls who are completely oblivious to how self-centered they can act and lash out in the most toxic way when they realize they are no longer the #1 priority. Guys who let people walk over them and enable this kind of behavior. And I think the thing that pisses me off the most is that unlike the usual dumpster fire of romance I love to consume, the series seems completely unaware of this fact and gives them every single pass possible. By the end of this show, I realized that this was all Himari's world and we were just living in it. There's even this one big final conflict that arose based on a lie Himari told about going to Tokyo, and it's completely solved with absolutely zero actions done by the main characters. Everyone gets a happy ending, and we learn that the hair can be as toxic and self-centered as it wants to be, but as long as there's an even more toxic and mega bitch hair to make it look less bad by comparison, it's still gonna win, because the hair's a quirky anime girl that says... So thank you for coming to my TED Talk and allowing me to deal with my anger the only way I know how. Now, I'm just gonna cleanse my palate with my next series to calm me down. Oh, hell no! Hey guys, hope you enjoyed that video.
I think her name was like Sophia Floof or some shit like that.
your combo score to earn buffs. The leader dies. We're winning. Keep it that way.
Trust is a luxury you cannot afford in these games.
Hostiles return to the lead.
Sniper, incoming lethal. Do as I say. Incoming lethal. Sniper.
It's given us the lead. Enemy UAV inbound. Enemy UAV inbound. Hostile UAV established overhead. Net call. Enemy watchdog kilo inbound. They've taken the lead.
Yeah, man.
I was totally acting in self-defense.
Yeah, man.
You're being outplayed, Crimson One. Step it up.
This asshole!
You gotta be shitting me!
Hostile UAV established overhead. Enemy UAV inbound. Hostile counter UAV established above.
Hardcore team deathmatch. CIA, you're cleared hot. Work your frag list. Enemy UAV inbound.
This was over?
We're winning. Keep it that way. You're falling behind, Vincent.
Taking a shot. See you never, asshole. Flash trap set.
The lizard. We've taken the lead. Stay
Enemy
on
foot
task.
patrol. Hostile dust.
Hostile UAV established just overhead. Given up the lead.
Hope you enjoyed it while it lasted.
MTC's nearly dry. Get serious, Crimson.
Tracking enemy. Marking target look. Never mind. Oh, forget it. Never mind.
Report to the nearest distraction zone. Might have to make it quick.
Mission's bad. Get us the hell out of here.
Hardcore team deathmatch. Eliminate the enemy. We've taken the lead. Stay on task.
Enemy. Incoming.
Gotta be fucking kidding me.
UAV established above. Enemy UAV inbound. We claim the advantage, now hold it. We've given up the lead.
Enemy marked. One chance to fire.
CXC maneuvering.
Hostile UAV established overhead.
I didn't think we'd run this far.
The lead is up. They've taken the lead. They're walking all over you. Have some goddamn pride. We're winning. Keep it that way.
Enemy field upgrade.
All threats tonight. Scour the area. Find whatever they're fighting.
You're dangling from a rain-slicked monastery wall in Northumbria, and your life choices are seriously questionable right now. The stone crumbles under your fingers like week old bread, and below you, a dozen angry Anglo-Saxon guards are having what appears to be a heated debate about whether to turn you into a pincushion with their arrows, or just wait for gravity to do the job. Decide quickly, farm boy, growls Bjorn Ironhand from the longship bobbing in the harbor below. Either you prove you're worth the space on my ship, or you can swim home to Norway. Your former life of peacefully herding sheep seems really appealing right now, at least until you remember how they ate your best tunic when you weren't looking. The crew's betting mead rations on your survival chances, which is just great for morale. He's about as useful as a chocolate axe head, someone shouts from the ship. You'd be offended if you weren't so busy trying not to die. Your village elder's words echo in your head, how the gods had chosen you for the raiding party. Funny how they always seem to choose the skinniest farmer's sons instead of the elder's own well-fed offspring. The golden cross gleams above you, probably wondering how its peaceful monastery life turned into an impromptu Viking recruitment exercise. Well, if you're going to die anyway, might as well do it in style. Your next move better be good, because unlike those farming simulation games you used to play, this one doesn't come with a reload button. Turns out Vikings don't exactly have a gentle onboarding process. You managed to steal the cross and only took one arrow in the leg doing it, but now comes the real test, proving you belong on this ship of professionally violent lunatics. Your first lesson? Everything on a longship is trying to kill you. The ropes, the oars, the waves, and especially that suspiciously smiling veteran showing you the ropes, literally. Row faster, sheephugger, Bjorn bellows as you strain against an oar that fights you harder than your old ram during shearing season. Your muscles scream like they're being murdered by angry trolls. This isn't your grandmother's butter churning. Actually, you've met his grandmother. She could probably outrow the entire crew. The ship rocks violently and your breakfast decides it prefers life in the ocean. Your new crewmates find your seasickness hilarious. The crew's split between he'll die by Tuesday and he'll die by Wednesday. Only Halfdan bet on he'll survive, though you later learn he always bets against the crowd, since that one time everyone thought he'd die from an axe to the head. I want enough silver to buy my own ship, he grins, tapping the metal plate in his skull. Look, he's feeding the fish again. They've got a betting pool on how many times you'll throw up before reaching Denmark. The current record is 17, and you're determined to break it. At least the fish are well fed. You're creating your own little underwater following. Your first fans, someone jokes. If only your fans didn't smell like herring. Training isn't much better. That's your head, not your sword arm, your instructor Halfdan growls after you nearly decapitate yourself during sword practice. I've seen better footwork from a three-legged goat. The bruises are forming constellations on your body. You could probably navigate by them at this point. Old Helga, the crew's healer, has two solutions for everything. Either rub it with fermented fish paste, or wait till it falls off. You're never quite sure if she means the bandage or the limb. Still, better than farming though. At least here, when something tries to kill you, it's honest about it. The surprising part, you're actually getting better. Your sword doesn't feel like a lead weight anymore, and you've finally figured out which end of the axe is the dangerous one. Progress! Even Bjorn notices. Well, farm boy, he grunts after you manage to block his attack without falling overboard. Maybe you won't die immediately in your first real fight. Coming from him, that's practically a marriage proposal. Your first real raid comes faster than expected, like most near-death experiences in Viking life. The target is a coastal village that probably wasn't expecting its peaceful fishing morning to include longships. Remember, Bjorn announces, we're here to raid, not redecorate, and try not to die. The paperwork is awful. Turns out Vikings have HR issues too, just with more axes involved. The landing beach looks about as welcoming as a bear's dental appointment. Local defenders are already forming ranks, and you're pretty sure your legs shouldn't be shaking this much. The veteran next to you, Eric One-Eye, creative naming isn't a Viking strength, notices your terror. First-rate jitters, he grins, just pretend they're angry sheep. Easy for him to say, your sheep never carried spears. Everything becomes chaos faster than your sister's wedding after too much mead. You're swinging your sword like your life depends on it, because it does, when you spot a defender trying to flank Bjorn. Without thinking, you tackle the man into a conveniently placed pile of fish. Nice move, farm boy, Bjorn shouts, though maybe next time less fish, more sword. After that day, you earn a new status, the Viking who saved Bjorn's back, and only mostly smells like herring. Not exactly a saga-worthy title, but it's a start. Turns out, raiding is the easy part of Viking life. Winter in Scandinavia, that's the real enemy. The cold bites harder than a hangry wolf, and your beard has more icicles than hair. Eric demonstrates proper Viking winterization by coating his beard in seal fat. Keeps the icicles out, he proudly declares, right before a seagull mistakes his beard for lunch and dive bombs his face. And apparently attracts birds, he adds, spitting out feathers. Stop complaining, he continues, watching you chip frozen seawater off the ship's side while trying to maintain his dignity. This is nothing. Last winter was so cold we had to thaw our words over the fire before anyone could hear them. The crew's solution to everything is either mead or those horrifically fermented fish that smell like death took a vacation in a barrel. Eat up, Half-Dan grins, offering you something that might have been a fish in its past life. Builds character. You're pretty sure it's building something, but character isn't your first guess. Between the mysterious healing potions and old Helga's walk-it-off approach to medicine, you're starting to think Viking healthcare consists entirely of not dying until your body figures out what to do. Your first command comes during a raid that's going about as well as a blind giant in a pottery shop. The storm hit just as you reached the English coast, because of course it does. Half the ships are scattered, Bjorn's unconscious from a wave-thrown barrel, and suddenly everyone's looking at you like you're supposed to know what to do. Well, farm boy, Eric shouts over the wind. You've been watching Bjorn, what's the play? Great. Your first leadership opportunity, and it's during what feels like Ragnarok's wet dress rehearsal. You'd really prefer to start with something easier, like organizing mead hall seating arrangements. Time for some creative problem solving. You order the ships to use the storm's fury instead of fighting it, riding the massive waves into the harbor like nature's own battering ram. Either we'll make a spectacular entrance, you yell, or we'll give the fish something to tell their children stories about. The crew's laughter is half terror, half approval. The perfect Viking emotional blend. The storm delivers you over the harbor's defensive chains, and suddenly you're not just the farm boy anymore, you're the madman who turned certain death into victory. In Viking terms, that's the best kind of promotion. 20 years pass like a hangover after a successful raid, quickly, painfully, and with lots of interesting scars to show for it. You've earned your own ship, a crew that mostly follows orders, and a reputation that doesn't involve the word farm boy anymore. They call you Storm Rider now, though Eric still jokes it should be Fish Tackler after that first raid. You're leading your own raid when you spot a familiar sight, a young recruit dangling from a wall, looking about as confident as a chicken in a fox den. The crew's betting on whether he'll fall, and suddenly you're remembering your own first raid. Give him a chance, you tell the veterans. Some of them grumble. You distinctly hear, going soft, and probably another sheep hugger. The kid makes it, though his landing looks like a drunk goose trying to ice skate. Welcome to the Viking life, you say, helping him up. First lesson, the ground is harder than it looks. The crew laughs, but you notice them shifting subtly closer, protective. They might act tough, but Vikings take care of their own, even the clumsy ones who smell suspiciously like sheep. That's when you spot the glint of arrowheads in the morning sun. The monastery wasn't as undefended as your scouts reported. You shove the recruit aside just as the first volley hits. The arrow that finds your chest would probably hurt more if you weren't so annoyed at the irony. 20 years of surviving everything the world threw at you, only to be done in by an act of kindness. Odin has a twisted sense of humor. Your last moments are exactly what you'd expect from a Viking life. Chaotic, painful, and somehow still funny. The recruit you saved is trying to help, though his idea of first aid looks more like panicked chicken dancing. Stop fussing, you tell him. I've had worse. You haven't, actually, but dying men get to lie a little. The sky darkens. Either Thor is throwing a farewell party, or that head wound is worse than you thought. Through the haze of pain, you see them, the Valkyries gliding down from the storm clouds on horses made of lightning and mist. They're somehow both beautiful and terrifying, just like the Viking life you chose. You think about your journey from terrified farmer to Viking commander. All those near deaths and actual deaths, the raids, the storms, the absolutely terrible fermented fish. You know what really sucks about living as a Viking? You mutter to no one in particular. The dying part is actually the easiest bit. The last thing you see is the young recruit picking up your sword, holding it like he's afraid it might bite, just like you did once upon a time. The Valkyries approach, their weapons gleaming with otherworldly light. Time for your final raid. This one to Odin's Great Hall. Not bad for a farm boy who once thought the scariest thing in life was angry sheep.
This is a recorded message. Yahtzee isn't in right now. It's his summer holiday, so he took his kids to the beach. Like a normal person, who doesn't hang around YouTube mashing refresh expecting game reviews, despite knowing full well that big game releases are to summer what a high-starch diet was to the Irish potato famine. But there is something to talk about. We've made a habit each year of getting the Patreon subscribers to vote for what classic or overlooked game I have to do a fully ramblomatic review of during 1 week of the summer game drought. Editor Nick waded into the Discord to solicit suggestions, and by some horrifying arcane process known only to him, settled upon the following 6 finalists. 1. Danganronpa. Making its third appearance in the finals, the anime detective game is a popular recommendation but has a habit of being outvoted at the last stretch. It was pipped at the post by Chrono Trigger in 2023 and Knights of the Old Republic in 2024. Let's see if this year the weeb block can finally come together to outvote the retro weebs and the boring-ass normal-brained people. 2. Sid Meier's Pirates! I think that's how you pronounce that. The 2004 remake rather than the 1987 original. I mean, Jesus Christ, we're up for retro gaming, but we're not about to go back to running games on fucking oscilloscopes or stone tablets. I think someone might have heard a rumour that I like anything with an 18th century nautical theme, so perhaps we'll see how that rubs up against my attitude towards mini-games. 3. Deep Rock Galactic, a multiplayer mining survival type game about space dwarfs, which I have played, didn't really gel with it, but I can see how it might appeal. Not entirely clear on why someone thinks it would be funny to make me play it again, maybe because I am basically the diametric opposite of a space dwarf, that is, an earthbound tall person. 4. Jade Empire. I had to look this one up. Apparently it was an action RPG made by BioWare in 2005 as an Xbox exclusive, and which nobody bought. Good reviews, but no sequels were forthcoming. Apparently it was the decision to focus on this and Dragon Age that meant BioWare didn't make Knights of the Old Republic 2. So maybe one of those KOTOR fans from last year are still harbouring a grudge. 5. Factorio. The original top-down 2D game about factory making and pretty much bugger all else, this one got pretty damn close to winning last year. Christ knows why. I think it has one of those rabid fan bases who insist that no really, you too will soon become obsessed with creating visual metaphors for my internal thought processes when I'm trying to find room in my schedule for a sneaky wank. And 6. Elden Ring Night Rain. I was turned off Night Rain by its multiplayer focus, but frankly there's no rational reason for why I haven't played it yet, except that I just don't really wanna. The old Souls-like fatigue again. Still haven't finished base Elden Ring or played the DLC. I'll play Night Rain if you insist. I just find less appeal these days in getting pounded into the dirt by a 12-hit combo from a huge flaily lad with a very prominent adjective in their name. And that's this year's 6 finalists, and now all that remains is for you guys to vote on which one will get the fully ramblomatic treatment at some as yet undetermined point in this year's Summer Game Drought. Remember, only Patreon subscribers at the $5 a month tier or above get to vote, so if you want to have a voice, go to patreon.com/secondwindgroup and sign up. You'll get all sorts of other perks and bonus videos as well.
Heck you. That's it for tonight. Thanks everybody stopping and hanging out. See you all tomorrow.